flatland like a man on the run, riding down Highway 61. Sides of the roads all lined with fields, nothing but sunset in the windshield. Feel it as soon as I ride into town. This is where I go to slow down. Miles and miles of soybeans and corn. I'm in the place where the blues was born. About a mile from the big muddy river, place I'll always remember. Cabin on the lake and a fishing pole. Forever here I'll rest my soul. I can feel my worries drift away from being out in the sun all day. No matter where in the world I go, I'll always find home on the banks of that oxbow.
What's up, guys? Brad Chappell back with you at the Grizzly Jig Show 2024. I got double T's here. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Tony Sheppard, Big T.
Big T, Tony Sheppard.
And I'm Tony Hughes.
Just Tony Hughes.
You can call me Big T too if you want.
All right, we can go with that. That's easy for me. I've got a topic today that I thought I get asked a lot of times this question, but how do you adjust in the springtime with muddy water? And I know we're going to dive into it a little bit because there's a variation of different things that I know I've seen fish react to and do in muddy water. But I know both of you guys are excellent fishermen, to say the very least. But I want to get your take on muddy water and what you look at it and how do you adjust from it? Big T, number one.
I'm a clear water fisherman.
Right.
But I do like muddy water. I had a guide trip yesterday, and we was out there, and I started the trip. Fish have been out, and I've been catching my fish in 10 or 12 foot of water on flats. And I went out there and started, and it's little fish. And I was about an hour into it and had a couple keepers. And I'm like, these fish have moved. And I noticed the water temperature was like 45. And the lake was just froze up a couple weeks ago, all the way to the river on the creek arm I was on.
Oh, wow.
And I eased back a little bit shallower, and I noticed the water temperature bumped up a degree. And that muddy water in this warm winter we're having is it had to fish in 5 foot of water yesterday.
5 foot of water.
5 foot of water.
And 47 degrees?
When I got back here in 5 foot of water temperature was 50.
5 degree difference.
Mm-hmm.
And you think it was?
And within like 300 yards.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it was a big difference. And that's to me is one of my favorite things about muddy water is you get some warm, sunny days in the wintertime, and them fish are going to go to it.
You think that's more of a springtime deal as far as?
Yeah, I think it. I mean, fish are like us. If you're cold, they're cold, so they're going to go to the most comfortable place that there is. And I think one thing was real fortunate on Kentucky Lake this year is we had the big freeze up, and I was scared to death of the shad kill. And we had, right after it froze up, we had a lot of warm rain, and it kept all them shad from dying. And it was going underneath the ice, melting it off the runoff. And those shad never left. They're still back there in 2 or 3 foot of water, and the fish have went back there with them now that that's their comfort zone.
Finding a little bit of warmer water typically in muddy water.
Muddier water. Muddier water's going to warm up quicker.
I know I've had guys before, even with me, that we get a lot of rain and they say, man, that lake's muddied up. We're going to catch any fish today. And I'm like, I'm going to look for some current and different things in muddy water. But as a general rule, it's going to warm up faster. And Tony on the left. Kind of give some of the pointers and some of the thought process when you think of muddy water conditions coming in.
My first thing I do in muddy water, like he said, I'm going to look for the warmest muddy water. Excuse me. And I'm going to upsize my bait.
Yep.
First thing I do is upsize baits because I want them to be able to see it. It's harder for them to see a little bit, harder for them to find your bait. But that's the first thing I do is go to I'm normally a 16th ounce, 32nd ounce jig guy. I'm going to an 1/8 right off the bat. And then if I feel like that's not working, I'll even go bigger to a 1/4. But that's basically what I do. And I'm looking for the warmest water I can find. and find the shad. Like he said, that muddy water warms up faster than clear water. So, and from my life experiences, and especially at Grenada, when it's gotten cold, everybody thinks the fish are going to move out.
Yeah.
And from my experience, they've always went shallower.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it's because they know that water warms up faster.
You know, another thing when I think of muddy water that I've seen kind of happen is they tend to get higher in the water column.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
beforehand that water was, and I never get to really fish clear water, so I don't have that mindset necessarily clear water. But we do have clear water for our lake, and if we're starting out with clear water and all of a sudden it goes muddy, and I've been catching them, let's say 18 to 22 foot, and that's kind of been the typical wintertime pattern on Ross Barnett for me. I know this muddier water is going to, and crappie will fool you.
Oh, yeah.
They will fool you.
They're like a woman.
Or fool me anyway. Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'm going to start looking shallower in the water column. I don't think they're going to move a lot as far as a big move necessarily where I have been catching them, but I feel like they're going to come up off the bottom more and suspend. Lake Washington as well, that lake there, it gets cold, gets muddy. I have seen those fish just about, I felt a foot under the water surface in 18 foot of water. And I'm talking old school. All three of us started old school crappie fishing,
Right.
spider rigging a lot. Mm-hmm. I'm going to slow down. I want those fish to be able to see those baits longer, but also upsize higher up in the water column. So if you don't have live sonar, and a lot of guys still don't have live sonar, a good tip for me is go back to where you've been catching them at even and start shallower and then work back yourself deeper. Because some of these fish, it's almost like they like sunning in that muddy water.
It is.
That's what I think they're doing.
Yeah.
And back to the muddy water, there's a totally different thing to me between muddy water and like fresh muddy water, runoff water.
Yeah.
To me, crappie don't like that. They'll get out there where the water's mixing. There'll be somewhere where that water's mixing, and that's where they'll be. But like if it's fresh runoff, I don't like that muddy water.
How long before, I know like cold fronts and muddy water comes in typically hand in hand in the wintertime in an early pre-spawn pattern. How long does it usually take for a fish to adjust?
I think sometimes I've went and really surprised myself thinking I'm not going to catch crab today, and they bite like immediately.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, I mean, you never know. And I have seen that they solo up for a couple of days, and then they start biting. But I don't know. They're like a woman. I mean, I'm serious.
Yeah.
And here's what I tell people. Like, you know, so on Kentucky Lake, Clear Lake, it gets muddy. Everybody's scared of it. Oh, let's go find the clear water. You don't leave home when your wife don't clean the house, do you? Them fish don't leave. They're just going to sit there.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example of something that's happened to me before on Reelfoot. You know, that's my home lake. I was fishing. This was before live scope, spider rigging. That was what I done. And there was this. Been catching fish in about 4 to 5 foot of water, and the lake had muddied up, and I'm still trying to catch these fish, you know, a foot off the bottom. And as they're trolling through there, you can see the water, it's mixing behind my line as I'm trolling. And I'm thinking, golly, and I wasn't getting any bites that day. And for some reason, I was trying to untangle my line. I was using a double rig, and I was trying to untangle my line on my top hook. And I had it just, that far up from the water doing that right there.
Yeah.
And a crappie come up and bit it. And I thought, what? And so I said, well, I'm going to try this. And I lowered it down, and I could see my top minnow just under the top of that water, and that was it. And I got to catching them crappie just like that, and I could see them hitting that top minnow. I'm like, what in the world? That's weird. But I guess the water, that mud was just on the top, and they was just under it. Is where they were at. It was weird how that worked out.
Like a
no doubt.
Like a floating dot.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a dark shadow right
Yeah.
for them to get underneath and ambush stuff and soak up the sun.
I think Tony even kind of touched on it. I want to elaborate about that as well. I like kind of fishing these areas that you're going to have it darker than the others. and you kind of touched on that a second ago. You got that fresh, muddy water rolling in, and all of a sudden it's almost. And you see these saltwater guys through the years that's really keyed in on that. I don't know what kind of line you would call that, but it's in between the muddy water, but in between the muddiest water.
Right. I remember as a kid growing up, that mud line would be coming out of the back one of the big creek arms on Kentucky Lake, and them old timers would fish the mud line. They would back up.
That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
Mud line?
Yeah.
Mudline.
That's the
They
word
would
I was
fish that
looking
mud
for.
line and they'd back out with it. And they would catch fish right where that mud, it's like what I'm saying, mixing that water is transition right there. And they'd fish that line. They might start 200 yards that way. And as the day progressed, they just followed that mud line out and caught fish all day. And that's pre-live scope.
Yeah.
And I'm a kid,
Well, the thing about this, and I think we have, especially the tournament side of things, we've almost put in our mind that that's the only way to fish nowadays is live scope and live sonar. But this technique and all of this, what we're talking about, no matter really what equipment you got on your boat, the old timers were using that mindset of fishing that mud line way before this live sonar come out.
Right.
Yeah. They figured it out
Yeah.
pre-trial, We're fortunate and can see what's going on. They didn't know. I mean, we didn't know. I remember the first lake I ever fished as muddy was Grenada. It's probably been 15 years ago. And I was there fishing, didn't catch nothing. Everybody's like, you're fishing too deep. So after that point, I figured it out. My rule of thumb when I went to Grenada, it didn't matter how deep I was fishing, I never fished over what I called 2 pulls. And I would reach to my reel and pull my line out about 3 foot. So I never fished over 6 foot deep. Then I got to figuring out, like he said, run that top bait, barely underneath the water. And my biggest fish is a 348, and I seen its fins when I set the hook.
That's merely inches. Then.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just a different mindset.
What about bait colors? Do you think of different bait colors when you think necessarily of this muddy water?
Old school, yes. When I was trolling, I felt like color was an attractant, like I was trying to draw the fish to the bait. With live scope, you're putting the bait within 6 inches of the fish's nose, so that's going to color a more natural color now. Because if I'm getting it that close to the fish's face, I want it to look as real as it's going to look. And when I was trolling, I felt like fish maybe 3 foot would come over and hit an orange jig versus a chartreuse jig.
But did you ever see that happen before live scope?
What?
As far as that, you would use that orange bait and you felt like you had a color pattern in that muddy tone?
At the end of the day, I'd have all the colors on the same, all 8 rods have the same color on all of them. And the color made a difference.
Without a doubt.
But like again, you've got 8 posts and you're trying to track the fish over 2 or 3 foot to bite it.
You want that strike zone to be pretty big then.
Yeah, I wanted a big strike zone. spread them posts wide as I could go.
That was the way we was. It's you get keyed in on one color, and then you'd put it on everything, and then they would quit biting that color, and you're going, uh-oh, now I got to figure something else out.
Right.
Start peeling
But
them off.
in muddy water, even still though, like now when I go to Grenada or any of those muddy lakes, the first color I'm putting on is orange.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Orange is a muddy water color, and so I'm going to put some form of orange on if it's muddy.
Yeah, and I think I seen we did a podcast with John Harrison from Grenada about wading and stuff, and I can always remember looking at John's boat from weigh-ins or just the parking lot. I know he's a big lime chartreuse guy.
Yeah, he is.
Orange head. You can just about bet that John Harrison's going to have a. Sorry, John. Told that out on you there, but orange head and the lime chartreuse jigs is a John Harrison special when I see that combo.
I remember when I first started fishing at those Mississippi lakes, and I'd go down there to those tournaments, and everybody'd have all these trolling poles, and there'd be big old pink head, 1/4 ounce or bigger heads on, and lime and chartreuse or orange and chartreuse.
Yeah.
Everybody had those colors on.
Yeah, absolutely. And and Tony, he's not only Tony, but a lot of these guys are looking to put that bait so close and so the strike zone's smaller, and he's wanting to convince that fish pretty much inside its mouth that
Right. I just wanted to inhale.
you just want to inhale.
Gone.
But I think we got, especially in the beginning of live scope, and a lot of guys were out and just said that flat out color was not an influence at all. And us guys that have fishing all these tournament trails and guiding for all the different years before that, we're like, no, I don't really know about that. And I've always felt that color made a difference because I was wanting that strike zone, that fish to chase it a long ways. And live sonar, you don't have to have them chase it that far.
No.
You don't need it to be that 3 foot, and that's a big advantage, of course, of catching more fish is a live scope and live sonar. But
When fish are biting, color does not matter.
right,
When they're biting, they're wanting to eat, color does not matter. It's when they're not wanting to eat is when that color matters.
yeah,
And
it
I
goes,
see it even with live scope.
yeah, yeah, me too. I'm still a big color guy, and I think that's just one of the things that's neat about crappie fishing is you think of bass fishing and everything else that you just flat out use natural tone baits. And crappie, I mean, I don't know of a color combination out there, and there's literally hundreds of different color combinations to say.
Yeah.
Out there, and really
Right.
every one of them could catch crappie
They
any
do.
given day. We could all look at our jerseys right now and our hoodies, and go out there and on a different day, and this color combination
Oh, yeah.
be a key.
Right.
But do you
all the
not-
way to Tony here.
Do you not think that size profile probably matters more than color?
I think it's about the same, honestly, and I think it depends on the technique as well.
Yeah.
Technique beforehand, I think the color mattered more, say, if I'm long lining. I think that color makes more of a difference then than it would be, vertical jigging. So I think it depends on the technique as far as the profile would be more important or not.
I agree.
And I think the presentation, honestly, is probably even more key than profile.
I agree with that too.
And
But the reason I asked is like yesterday.
Yeah.
I've been catching on monkey milk.
right,
And yesterday, the little 2-inch bait wasn't cutting it. Like you
Right.
said, muddier water. I went to a 3-inch bait, started smoking it.
Yeah.
It was all profile.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
just it's what they want.
yeah,
But I think the profile in the muddier water, the bigger profile moves more
Disperses more water.
disperses
Yeah.
and moves more water and causes more of a disturbance
Yeah.
and gets their attention further away.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
yeah. I like I said, the profile. If I'm going into typically a muddy water situation, these 3-inch baits can really shine because I'm wanting to get that fish's attention. And like I said, live sonar, we know that we can make that presentation be tighter on that fish, but it also helps them just locate it a little bit quicker.
right.
And even if I'm guiding or whatever else, I'm kind of one of those fish. I like catching fish.
Oh yeah.
So the faster that I can move and change spots, the more I can get attention of the fish, the better.
Right.
Profile in the spring in muddy water, I'm always going to usually start out with a bigger bait.
Yeah.
That's how I feel too. And you might be able to say, well, they're not biting it. Downsize and kind of go from there. But I think typically muddy water, I'm going to look for a bigger bait.
Well, now with live scope,
You can
you
see
start
it.
with that bigger bait, and if they don't want it, you can always go down because you can see it now. Before you didn't know that, so you always started small and went bigger. Now we know what we know. We start bigger and go down.
Yeah, there's no rule. Different waters have these personalities, and I've said that so I think forever. Kind of like all three of us guys here sitting at this table, we all have different preferences, and it's almost like lakes and different waterways have different preferences on
I agree.
on colors and profiles,
Yes.
and even seasonality is a big factor. But I just that's part of the fun of it, almost,
Oh, if everything fished the same, it'd be pretty boring.
It is. It's like a puzzle. You're trying to. That's what my wife asked me. She said, "Why do you go fishing every day?" And I said, "It's a puzzle that I like to figure out
Yeah.
every day."
I feel the same way. The thing too, even about it, is there's very few days, and I don't know if I don't get satisfied is a good terminology with it. Is there's very few days that I feel like I've got it all the way figured out.
Right.
There's always days that I feel like I wish I could have fine-tuned it a little bit more.
And then you go out the next day and like, I'm gonna finish figuring that out,
Yeah.
and they've changed.
They
again.
changed. You're like, this is a whole different thing. It's different. And I think that's the challenge. I mean, it's so challenging. And one of the seminars I did yesterday, I had a fisherman in there, and he just started fishing. And, and I wanted to explain to him that it's challenging for everybody.
Oh, yeah.
Is challenging for all of us with these different conditions, and muddy water is a condition that can be challenging because it's just a flat out change of the lake.
Mm-hmm. You see some of these people, and I talk to many people when they come through, and they think that every time I go out I catch fish.
Yeah.
They think, you got it figured out, you catch them all the time. No, I don't catch them all the time. There's days I go out there and I struggle.
Yeah.
And that's just part of it. And you're going to have days where you're going to struggle, but those are learning days too.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you might figure something out that you'll take over for the rest of your fishing career. You'll learn,
And I try to even utilize to talk about that subject and that matter is, I've been out days in this wintertime that literally I was like, all right, I've got this pattern to figure it out. It is the no bite day. This is they're not going to bite today. But instead of going back and loading up, that's that day that I'm going to go out and really side scan.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to another section of the lake and say, you know what? I know the fishing's not going to be all that good. I'm not going to beat this dead horse any more than I have already. But let's go to an area that I don't know about.
Right.
Take advantage of those days, and you can learn a lot about the water that you think you know.
Oh yeah. I fish spots all the time and go from one to the other and find a new spot. I'm like, how many times have I drove by that?
Yeah, overpassed over the top of it all this time. But I think challenge yourself. Keep trying to learn these different things about your lake that you're on, and dig into it.
Make it a point to learn something every time you go out. Try to figure something new out every time you go. Even if you're sitting there and you're catching fish left and right. Some people are just content with it. But I say when I'm catching them like that, I go to trying something different.
Yeah.
To see if I can figure something else out.
I always tell guys too, if I'm catching them, let's say on a orange and chartreuse jig head, I like to look at, I'm going to put on a solid orange bait. And then also I'm going to put on a solid chartreuse to see if it's really one of those colors they prefer over the other. But there's very few days that I leave the lake and feel like I've got the complete pattern down to the T. And I don't get satisfied with it. And most anglers that are really good, I think, do that as well, in my mind.
Yep.
Well, guys, I've definitely enjoyed it.
Hey, I did too.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate you having us.
Yeah, I mean, how can they somebody reach you if they want to go fishing with each of you fellas?
I'm on Facebook, Big T Guide Service.
Big T Guide Service.
Yes, sir.
That's pretty easy to remember.
Pretty
too.
easy, isn't it?
I like it.
And I got a website. It's Tony Hughes Guide Service. And I'm on Facebook also. And my phone number is 731-589-2386.
What lake do you got on, Tony Hughes?
Reelfoot Lake
Okay.
and Kentucky Lake.
All right.
Kentucky and Barkley Lake.
Sounds like a plan to me. Until next time, Brad Chappell here. Make sure you hit that follow, subscribe, turn your notifications on, and let your buddies know. Join us Tuesday nights, Today's Bite. Till next time, Brad Chappell here.
Big T out.
Big T out.
Tony Hughes out.
Holla.
About a mile from Big Muddy River, a place I'll always remember. Cabin on the lake and a fishing pole. Forever here I'll rest my soul. I can feel my